Welcome to Live Sense8. I'm Sheila Applegate.
And I'm Zac Hansen.
And a special shout out to Justin Applegate for the composition of the Live Sense8 podcast music. In this podcast, we dive deep into the concepts of consciousness and other interesting trivia in the Netflix Original Series Sense8. We're doing an episode-by-episode exploration of how we can live a Sense8 life. And we're also talking with cast and crew and team members of Sense8 to hear the experience from their perspective.
Enjoy the show. And this week's episode is brought to you by Divine Phoenix Books. Books with a purpose for a positive change.
We are really excited about our guest today. You know Sandra Fish from her role as Nomi's mom, Janet, the woman we love to hate on Sense8. Sandra's acting credits also include Obit, 2013, Radiant, 2005, and she was also in Bartlett with Michael Summers, who plays Bug on Sense8. Sandra wrote a screenplay hired by William Hurt based on her work with refugees. She lived in Kenya for 2 years and was the first and only Mzungu, or white person, on the Swahili soap opera, which aired all over Eastern Africa. Sandra is also a caregiver and co-founder of the Humane Prison Hospice Project, with decades of passion for prison reform. She taught at Rikers Island Prison, worked as an employment specialist for newly released prisoners in Manhattan, attended ex-prisoner support groups, and visited Sing Sing to observe classrooms there. While working with older, newly released prisoners, she heard time and time again, "I'll never go back. If I go back, I'll die in prison. I don't want to die in prison. I don't want to die in prison." Sandra cannot get that out of her head or her heart and will not give up on the mission to make sure there is an end-of-life care with prisoners giving volunteer care in every prison. Currently, Sandra is co-chair for San Francisco End of Life Network and has trained and worked as a hospice volunteer with added training in pediatric hospice and vigil. We're going to dive into all this incredible work she's doing in the prisons and hospice after we talk about some of the experience she's had on Sense8. So welcome, Sandra.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, we're pretty excited to have you here, and I love getting to know you and see and hear the beautiful things you're bringing into this world, and it's just such a pleasure to hear the Sense8 energy going out through you as well.
It seems like such a contradiction to your character.
He's different than I am. Yeah.
Well, you know what? Let's do that. Let's talk about your character right off the bat. Let's get this on the table. A lot of the people we've interviewed have talked about how the character they play is very much like who they are in person. So I don't think that's the case with you.
Not at all.
Tell us how you relate to Janet and your feeling of playing that role.
Well, I do have strong philosophy around this as an actor and as a human being, because I do feel that as an actor you get to truly experience the unity, the truth of unity in humanity, and that separateness is an illusion. So when I do roles, and as an actor, it's wonderful to do people who are completely different than myself, to really get in their skin. And I approach it always without judging them. and loving them. You know, I have to say this, I kind of channeled an ex-sister-in-law who I really love, but she has such really narrow-minded and unhealthy views. So when I got into Janet, you know, Janet thinks she's right.
Absolutely.
She really cares about, you know, Nomi, Michael. And so my approach is to embody her as honestly and as I can, because it needs to be seen too. It's a sad and horrible way of living, but it's a reality, and so I want it to be as honest as possible. And when I was working with a lovely Jamie, who I love her, the first scene, because she's upset with in between scenes, and I would grab her hand and say, "I'm so sorry." Oh. But yeah, and people who don't know me, and then people who know me are like, "Whoa." And they said, I tried to tell my friend you're a nice person. Even Jamie said that. She goes, I tried to tell my friend you're really a nice person. They don't believe me. So that's satisfying as an actor.
Yeah, that's a huge
job.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you said that, you know, going into these characters and with people that you tried to, you know, come at these other points of view from characters with an open heart. Did you start to, I'm not going to say conform, but did you start to have an appreciation for characters that might be opposite of you as you open up and channel who they might be and see life through their eyes?
Well, the appreciation comes from an understanding. I don't agree with them. It's not like, oh yeah, well maybe she's right. No, that's not where I go. I just understand where they're coming from, and it's not an evil place. Although it may seem evil, it's you know, I think there are very few evil people. I think people are good and they mean well and they're doing the best they can. And so understanding them, a Tolstoy quote, I used it when I worked with refugees in Africa too, because I wanted to understand their situations, is Tolstoy said, to know anything, you need to love it. And so approaching something with love to know it really does work. It has worked for me. So
definitely
yeah,
shows through with this
I don't
role.
walk away going, oh, I'm on board with what Janet thinks. I have a tenderness towards her that many people probably don't.
Yeah, we actually when we talked about the hospital scene earlier in the episodes we talked about how it is a form of love. I mean, like you said, she clearly loves her child. We express love in different ways. So it's still love. It's just not necessarily the expression of love that we would like to receive in our life.
Yeah, and I will openly say it's unhealthy and damaging and destructive.
Right.
A form of it's still her way, but she needs guidance or help or something. But yeah, it's destructive to her daughter. So
that gives me. So one of the things I noticed is that Janet is perhaps the only, and this is not about acting, and I think it's going to change. I really believe it's going to change. But in the scene so far, I think that Janet is the only one-dimensional character, because in the sense that Lana and all the writers do an amazing job of making sure we see that even the, quote, villains are multidimensional. There's different aspects, things that make them up, but we don't get a window into Janet yet with that. So yet. So,
Yet.
right. But so I know you just said you kind of channeled an ex-sister-in-law that you love, which helped you bring that understanding in. Did you create a backstory for her so that you could play her more? So even though we haven't shown through the script any deeper dimensions in her, you clearly can see it in your acting and in your face and some of the scenes, the torment within you that creates that behavior. Did you create a backstory for her that would help you to draw that in?
Yeah, I when I first was auditioning, of course, I had her a little more tender actually, and Lana when I first hit the set gave me some direction where I was like, oh, okay, and the backstory. Is a very uptight childhood and a lot of pain and not being able to be herself and being brought up in a upper class sort of conservative restrictions everywhere. I had some ideas there, sometimes my backstories are a little over the top, maybe sexual abuse as a child. And so this absolute this control freak, everything it's all driven from fear.
Right.
So this and her image is so important because of the damage, so that how people think of her, and I did have this backstory, and I always kind of fantasized that it would come into a scene, but it didn't. That Janet delighted in little Michael, who would dress up probably in dresses and do things, and delighted because she loved her child so much, and because this child was creative and everything. But at some point, maybe at age when Michael Nomi was 5, other people were giving her looks, criticizing, and so she did an about face and got and so it just is this layers upon layers, and an unhappy marriage, staying in that for the appearance of it. I'm very excited, though, for the genius that is going to come in the special.
Yay. That was one, multiple people have mentioned that you have an integral part in the special. Can you share any of that or no?
What I'll share is because when I didn't receive the scenes yet, I was like, what are they going to do with me? What can they do? And I hope I get the script soon because, I need to, there's got to be something. And when I got it, it was something so surprising that I had not, because I was considering it, every possibility. And they wrote something I had not even considered. It is such genius. And it delighted me so much.
Perfect.
I thought, if I can pull this off. I really hope I did pull it off, but it's really is genius what they did. So I really can't, I don't want to, I can't spoil it. I don't even
I'm
tell
okay with
my
that
friends
spoilers.
to do, but it's pretty, it's remarkable. I think people might like Janet.
I think so too. Well, like I said, they haven't. I think one of the things that Lana wants to make sure of is that everyone is multidimensional, even with their choices. So I think we'll. I know. I believe we will. I happen to be a psychic, but
that's awesome.
So hopefully you'll come back after the premiere or after the finale, and then we can talk about what happened in it.
I would love to. Are you kidding? I would love to. Thank you.
Well, that'll be fun. Yes. So tell us more about, so did you then actually audition specifically for Janet, and how did that go, and how has your life changed?
Story because I auditioned for, it was Janet, I was very excited. And it was very secret. They wouldn't tell us really who was doing it or what it was. And I thought, I got this. You know how it's a wonderful feeling when you feel like, okay, I know this. I got this. You do the audition, and then you have a call back, and then I'm living in this cabin, and I don't have a car. I didn't have a car for like 10 years. A commercial in Sense8, I finally, because I don't borrow money or anything. So I want to pay cash for things. So I bought a car after Sense8.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Anyway, so I'm in this kind of precarious living situation, and they said, okay, they really want you, and then you have this long conversation with the casting director, because they want to make Lana and Lily wanted to make sure I wasn't really Janet, and see who I was, and all of that, and so they were inviting me to the table read, but I wasn't quite booked, So you can't really embrace it till then. And I remember I was standing waiting for this funny little country stage. It's called the Stage Bus, and I had a phone call from my agent who said, "Well, they've released you. They're going to cast it in Chicago because their schedule has changed, and they're going to shoot their first scenes with Janet in Chicago." And so I remember, of course, being bummed out. And I remember I kept thinking, well, that just doesn't sound right. I was not quite accepting it. And I was disappointed, but I wasn't laying on the floor screaming. But I was like, wow, that just doesn't feel right at all. And this went on for nearly a month of not feeling right. And I get a call at the cabin about 6 o'clock one night. My agent's like, well, do you want to fly to Chicago? And I said, of course they didn't find any actors in Chicago. So I was very happy. Very, very, very happy. My daughter works at Pixar. She's on the producer track there. So she grew up with all this madness of acting, and my mother's an actress. And so she gets very excited when things happen. And she was like, Mom, this is a game changer. She was very happy. And that's satisfying too. One of the worst things as an actor for me is I can handle the disappointments, but a lot of friends and family are like, you didn't get it? Like, oh, yeah, sorry.
You have to comfort them instead of them comforting you.
I hesitate to even say when I'm auditioning for things. But very, very, very happy. And the whole theme for me in Sense8 about the unity and the connection, because I so firmly believe that, not as a pithy little thing. I feel it's scientific. We are connected. Mm-hmm. And there's no question about that. And when you alienate anyone, you're alienating yourself or part of yourself, and people aren't happy because of that. I want to be happy. One of my goals in life. So connecting and is a reality for me. We breathe the same air. We're even these things like, if one of us is chained, none of us are free. These are things that are true. They're not just warm-hearted things to say. So I was very happy with and the atmosphere on the set. And
yeah, I was going to ask you, because you then, Michael talked to us about kind of being in San Francisco and feeling a little bit like an outsider because he was just commuting, but you got put right in then and it's also interesting because you didn't have a car, so how are you going to get to the set? Instead you just had to take one flight and then you were there.
Yeah.
Right? It was very convenient for you.
I always figured out though. I mean, I've hitchhiked, I've walked miles. I did it for 10 years and a little more actually, but I got to fly over and land in Chicago.
So how was that, working with the Wachowskis and J. Michael and all of the cast? And what was that experience like for you?
It was a very positive experience. I did some TV movies in the 80s with screaming directors and just shoot anything kind of thing. And I do have a theater background. So the working with them, very creative, which is so satisfying, and very supportive. It is, Lana does have a strong motherly presence,
Mm-hmm.
and just very, she gave, when we flew to Paris and I always think of myself as, I'm this minor character, and she's just the biggest hugs, and you just feel so welcomed. And I'm also an actor, though, who needs, I kind of isolate myself when I'm working. It's hard for me to, especially with a character like Janet.
Right.
I can't hubbub and glad hand and talk on the set and that kind of thing. I sort of need a lot of quiet and focus. I've always been that way. But the set just was a very warm, creative is the main thing. I love the creative feeling on the set. And it was a mission. Everyone seemed on board. Everybody, the sound people, everybody seemed to have the same mission of making it work and doing bringing what they had. Same thing as in the actual show,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel strongly about. We all have strengths. We all have weaknesses. One of my least favorite sayings is, "Oh, I pulled myself up my own bootstraps."
Right.
That's impossible. Okay. No one. And never met anyone, nor will I ever meet anyone who has done it alone. We really do need each other's strengths to accomplish anything. So that was a strong feeling about the show too. Yeah, it's really exceptional. Really exceptional.
That's great. And it's just consistent across the board. We haven't heard anyone, complain. Not that they maybe would on a podcast, but also you can see it in the way people continue to represent themselves. There's no gossip, in a world that likes to gossip, you don't hear any. Everything seems to be in full integrity with Sense8.
Yeah, integrity is the word.
Yeah.
Because that's a wholeness, it's a wholeness. And it's a connectedness if you have integrity. Yeah.
So
awesome.
I do need to ask you, we're going to go to a clip in a second, but I got to go back to, because I'm a spiritual channel and I work with people and help them channel. I believe that actors are, some actors channel in the same way that I would channel a being that would bring in messages. So you mentioned channeling. Can I prod you to talk about what that feels like and means to you?
Sure. It's a combination of things, and I think at some point it's the letting go part where the channeling can happen a bit. I do all the the backstory, the memorizing, the thought of the scene and all of that. And then the letting go part where completely, and it's very satisfying, the complete letting go and allowing the character to come in and do whatever they do.
Right.
So when I'm working, the best moments are when I'm not thinking at all. I really don't think.
Mm-hmm.
The character is there doing all my thinking, all my movements, everything. So I don't know, how much channeling that is, but that's the sense I get.
No, I think that's a perfect description of channeling. I really do. And I think it's so much more natural than people, especially creatives. I think artists channel, novelists channel, actors channel. I think that it happens much more than people realize. That's why I wanted to go back to that, because it's not a huge, it's
a quality we all possess if we exercise it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you said when playing a character like this, you have to kind of not chat and
Isolate.
Isolate. Do you?
Yes.
Do you feel like you kind of merge with that character? Are you sort of on some level channeling throughout until, what the whole time you were in Chicago?
I do. That's my best scenario. It's very hard to do because people do come up and talk and I hate being rude, although I have been rude and just done it. Gone, leave me alone.
Right.
But I would prefer that to stay in the character. Now I don't do that. Like I didn't talk to people who came up in character, but I prefer that in anything I'm working on. I try to do that. That's why I try and get alone so that I can stay in that, because I feel like if I stay in that, more creative things will come to me. I'm not done working just because I've learned the lines and have my character down.
Right.
I want it to always have an opportunity to have something else pop in. So yeah, that would be my preferred, but that's an ideal situation. I'm not Daniel Day-Lewis who gets to go on the set and go, everybody treat me like Janet. I should have.
Did you see the movie with the documentary with Jim Carrey when he did that for a whole movie?
Jim and Andy, about the comedian.
You'll have to watch
I
that.
forget his last name. Yeah.
So Jim Carrey stayed in character for a whole movie, but they filmed him not behind the scenes. And so he was channeling, he brings the family of the person in. It's called Jim and Andy. It's a really cool documentary.
Is it Andy Hoffman? I think. I don't know. I'm trying to.
Yeah, I can't remember.
He was before my time.
But do you ever have trouble letting go of the character when it's time to be done? Or how do you do that? What technique do you use?
It's almost scary. I've done very dramatic parts that are people in the audience would be crying and see me after the show, and I'd be like, "Hey, how's it going?" It ruined the whole experience. But no, I'd never have had during rehearsals in theater. It seeps into my life. But once I'm doing, set and ready and like. I got off the set from Sense8. No, I have no.
Not at the end. But then, so during the rehearsal, growing up as a mom, being another mom. So as you're rehearsing, did it ever affect your relationships during those periods of time? Did you have to navigate?
I think it did. Because I was, especially during that time, I was an especially obsessed actress. And so I think it kind of did, maybe not dramatically, but maybe mostly because I was so focused on the work and relationships came second. And my daughter didn't come second, but she did have to suffer a bit. I mean, at one point, an agent wanted me to. I raised her in Dallas, Texas. I'm from the East Coast, but long stories about how we ended up in Texas. But my daughter's father was in Texas, and she was only 3 at the time, and a very wise person counseled me and said, "Do not take your daughter to LA. You will regret it the rest of your life, or New York." And just, so I didn't go to the larger markets and have never regretted it. And but I still was an obsessed actor in Dallas doing, theater stop, and she'd eat Kentucky Fried Chicken in the green room, and I was very intense. If the phone rang, don't answer that phone. So now her job at Pixar, they have her on the producer track, and she's amazing. She was always the adult in the family. But at one point, they said, "Well, now you're going to be handling creatives on the next film. How do you feel about that?" I looked at them and said, "I have been handling creatives my whole life."
That's awesome.
And I love her approach, because her approach is, I love creating a space that makes it easier and supportive for the people creating. And that's really, she's very, very good. So I'm quite proud of her.
That's quite a gift.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you helped her get that way.
I did. I used to tell her, you get by me, you've got it made.
Well, I believe she picked you, so she knew what she was in store for.
She is awesome, I have to say. Since the second I saw her, I went, oh my God, I got Alan.
That's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's do a clip. We're going to see you in action when Nomi falls off the motorcycle.
This is in the hospital.
Yeah, in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mom, she's up.
My God, I'm sure he's going to be in a coma the rest of my life.
How you feeling, Michael?
Oh, my name is Nomi.
Oh, I'm sorry. Your mother's been calling you Michael.
What kind of name is Nomi? Have you ever heard of anyone named Nomi? You were Michael before you came out of me, and you will be Michael until they put me in my grave.
Mom, come on. She almost died.
Serves you right. You shouldn't be riding on motorcycles. Do you know how many people a year die on those things?
Where's Amanita?
She left.
She wouldn't have left me.
This hospital only allows family into critical care.
She is my family.
Please, Michael, this isn't your blog. This is your life.
I think that you should go.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm your mother, and I love you. It may be on my terms, but I do. So I'm not leaving here until you talk to Dr. Metzger. You still want me to go after he tells you what he told us? And I promise I will leave you alone.
There it is.
You're awesome.
There's that one little redeeming quality at the end is like, oh, I'm going to stay here for this and then I'll go. But other than that, I was like, it was like fingernails on a chalkboard for me. So you did a great job.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that more than you know.
I don't know if this is just in my head or if it was intentional, but I never got, until hearing you say it and talk to you and really focus on this line and you saying, what kind of a name is Nomi? It's Nomi, like Knowme.
Yes. Yes.
I did not get that till today. That's amazing.
I know, it took me a while too, and all of a sudden I went, oh, Nomi.
It's a begging to be known by her. I mean, and just to have those lines. You know, one of the things I'm just always in awe of as we dive deeper in is how profound each line is. It's like almost every single line in this show has multiple meanings. Like, so anyway.
No, the writing is incredible. Yeah.
So did you realize, so you did realize that when you were saying the line?
Nomi?
Yeah.
You know, I did realize it, but I wasn't, when I was saying it, I wasn't thinking it.
Right. Because you would have been in character. Yeah. Good.
And in that scene, I could really see, at least till the end there, where there was like this some true compassion and love. But I could really see where you talked about her as a character and her backstory about how image is so important. Like, I thought that really stood out there.
Yeah. And I think the fear around what, you know, like the seclusion of being, you know, I mean, I wasn't raised upper class, but I was raised in a middle class suburb, and definitely there was some sheltering, like, you know, motorcycles were scary, right? Like, or, you know, her neighborhood might be not a safe neighborhood, or, you know, she refers to the neighbors, but in a suburb or upper class, you wouldn't have that same kind of neighborhood family. It's also different. And just the foreignness of it, as she talks about that, like, it's scary to her that she's losing her child to some, not just by the transition, but to a whole culture she doesn't understand.
Yeah. no, and it's just not acceptable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, going to the country club, and it's not acceptable. And the conflict, the inner conflict of it, because Janet loves Nomi deeply and had this, special relationship when Nomi was a small child, I feel, and that it was blown apart, and she took the path of fear.
Right.
I held a friend's hand when she was dying, and she wrote this amazing poem. But the gist of it was, you have a choice: you live by fear or love, and you make that choice. And they're very different paths.
In every moment, that's your only choice, really, isn't it? You know?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So you had alluded to earlier that was a pretty intense scene to film for both you and Jamie. Do you want to share any more of that or not?
Well, it was just the, and I had started out, like I said, a little softer, and then Lana was like, well, wait a minute. She said something like, now that was interesting, but, here's a laptop, here's this. And she really, in her very simple but deep way of directing, made me know what she wanted. And it was a much more harsh person.
Uh-huh.
I mean, harsh and controlling. And so that it was, I got it. And so that was inflicted on Jamie, and Jamie was in tears, and I felt it, I felt that intensity, and in between takes, I grabbed her hand and apologized, and she was always so generous and said, "Oh no, you're fabulous. It's good. It's making me upset."
Right. So you're doing your job.
We had a very close relationship when we were working, always hugging. And she, and it was funny, the second season when I walked in and I was nervous and had gotten my script a little late, and I was, and when I saw Jamie, and I told her this too, I said, she gave me a big hug, and I said, God, no, I feel like I'm like zapped back to my body. I felt, some people do that for you, and she's one of those where I felt like, okay, I'm in my body and know where I am. Okay, good. We're going to be okay.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So kind of along this line, I'm going to take one of the Twitter questions because it seems similar to what we were just talking about. So Janine Sense8 is her Twitter name, and she says, as the woman we love to hate, I would just like to say kudos to her. It takes phenomenal actress to make me want to reach into my TV screen and strangle someone. But then she goes on to the question, which is, I guess I would just want to know how she felt playing a bad guy in a show that was full of so much empathy.
That's a great question.
Yeah, isn't it?
It really is. And maybe it speaks to who I am out in my real life. It doesn't bother me at all, because I'm playing an important piece, in a way. And I would chuck, I would laugh, I would get kind of a kick out of it because everyone's so beloved, and and I'm hated, and it's sort of humorous to me, but so it didn't bother me. It was someone's got to do it,
right?
So that was me, and no, I'm fine with that. I'm absolutely fine with it. It didn't ever. I think even the other actors, it was very funny. When we were in Paris, I believe it was the one who plays, the Iceland father. Lovely. Anyway, he came into the dressing room, and I was smiling and talking, and he kind of smiled and looked at me and shook hands, and then he went, "Oh, I can recognize you with that." So a lot of the other actors didn't even recognize me with just smiling.
Right. Yeah, your pictures look like a different person. Like, if I didn't know I was on your bio and your website, I would be like, who is this?
Yeah, that's to me as an actor, that's one of my favorite things is getting into very different people. So yeah, so no, that it just didn't faze me, because when I'm Janet, I'm Janet.
Right.
And it's okay. Janet's in her own ice world that, she's not aware enough to feel like that, So, yeah.
Do you think the fandom is different with you because you played that role? Like, I mean, there's like a lot of stories about, have you run into fans?
Yes,
are you recognized even?
When I was in Paris, they didn't recognize me at first because there was a little crowd outside the door. And I'm sort of a shy private person, really, as outgoing as I can be. But so I'd leave and come, and then one would recognize me, and they were so dear, and they'd get their picture taken with me, and and they'd see I'm someone else, and I'm laughing and enjoying them, and but I haven't had that many experiences. I went somewhere with I went to see Michael's fabulous part and movie, the Boots Riley thing. Sorry to Bother You.
Oh yeah, that just won an award, right?
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
It's talk about creative and important. So anyway, we went together, and so people were recognizing him, and he was very generous and would introduce, well, what about Janet? And they're like, oh yeah. So people, when they see me in person, they don't scowl, and I don't think they recognize me, frankly, most of the time. Yeah.
You have a completely different aura, so I think that would make sense. People wouldn't recognize you.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. That's awesome. Should we do the second clip?
Sure. So this clip is it Tegan? Is that the character's name?
Your
Nomi's
other daughter?
sister?
Yeah.
Yeah, Tegan.
Yeah, okay, got it right. Cool, sweet. It's at the wedding when the FBI agent rolls on in.
Oh, good.
All right, here we go.
Seats until we have secured the individual in question.
Now hold on a second.
FBI.
What right do you have to come into my
I am
church?
Special Agent Bendix. I'm here to arrest Nomi Marks.
No,
I don't understand.
you said it was free.
I thought it was. Oh, God, oh, God.
What the hell? Bug, you said it worked.
It did work. You saw it worked.
I knew this. I knew this was going to happen.
Mom, Dad, do something.
It's your own fault. I told you not to include him.
No, I won't let you.
If you want to finish your sacred rite, get out of the way. Otherwise, I can take you downtown too.
Tegan, be reasonable. We knew this could happen. We warned you.
Michael is a disaster. He ruins everything.
Janet, calm down.
There are police officers swarming my daughter's wedding as if I have not endured enough humiliation.
Mom.
Go ahead, take his side, even when he destroys your wedding.
Please, don't make it any worse.
Yep.
There you go.
So there we see, or hear rather, some of that control freak coming out, as she had to make it a point that she needed to talk in front of everybody.
See, I also hear the torment coming out.
Yeah.
I guess when I said she's the most one-dimensional as far as written so far, you're getting a window into the pain she endured.
Right.
And I'm going with your backstory now, and it's going on further in my head, in my imagination, that like even if she did have this close bond with her son before her daughter was born, and then if they're really like that, the mother being left out, kind of the bond that they created afterwards too, or something.
And I do think, and I have seen this with women like her, for whatever reason, the wedding is such a big spectacle and such an important social moment.
Right.
That, she lost all decorum at that point.
In a very put together way, though, right? Like she lost it all with her words, but she still just stood stoic.
Right, she was very stoic.
Tight, yeah.
Yes, tight. She needs to loosen up. She needs a little grace in her life.
She needs to dance.
Well, we'll see.
We will.
Yeah.
It's June 8th, right? We'll see.
June 8th, we'll see if she loosens up.
Oh, wait. Oh, dear. Yeah.
Yeah, Maureen Lobmeyer from Twitter asked if you would like to see character growth in the road ahead.
Of course, yes. I was always looking for that. I mean, I had mixed emotions. But yes, that's what I always foresaw, that there would be, and I always imagined that.
Right. And I'm sure, with the idea that there were many seasons to let her unfold, we would have seen
that was the hope.
Yeah.
I was always hoping, don't kill me.
Right.
Kill me.
The hope of every actor. Don't kill me.
Yes.
Yeah, we have another question from Twitter. It's Mind Thinker. Says, what is it like to now know that you have entered into a phenomenon that is worldwide?
It is so deeply satisfying and a real joy. And it's just such a incredibly wonderful feeling to be part of something that is so positive and so in line with the way I think, in terms of the unity and the inclusiveness and it's really satisfying, because so often as an actor you're working on projects that you're maybe not so proud of, or they're okay, or yes, I shot a Walmart ad. Such a whore. But, things like that. And so to get to work on something that's so meaningful and so surprising too, some of the people I know who I was surprised were so passionate. There's a woman who works high up in one of the hospice organizations, and she just went crazy when she found out I was in it, and how, I know so many people that are so deeply, personally, feel so personal about it.
Right.
And it's a beautiful, and you wish for, that's what it's about. That's what the acting and the filmmaking and creative arts for me needs to be about. And what is this? There is a yoga sutra about art is a contagion of true art is a contagion of feeling. And so we wanted to be positive, and evolve us more and inspire us as humans in a real way, and not in a distracting, shallow way, and pointing us in a nutty direction. This is a very, very, I think, true. It's science fiction, but for me, this is a truth.
Right.
And it's entertaining. They did it in a creative way, so people, it's beautiful. Yeah. So it's very satisfying. Yeah. I feel lucky.
How do you let me change this up. How has working on Sense8 changed you as a person or changed your career?
Interesting. I don't think it's over. So I can't say that it's affected my career in a way that I know about yet. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and there's a fun aspect, and I've met wonderful people, I've met wonderful people on it, even in the smaller roles, and then strangers. It connects me to people who love it, and I love that, and we share that, and it's a connection thing, and and hanging out with some of the actors from it is been really fabulous, and it's all positive. I can't say anything dramatic because it's so in line. It's almost like it's so in line with the way I've lived. So it's just one of those validating experiences, I think.
is it going to be hard for you to work on anything less than Sense8, so to speak? Like just the caliber and quality of people and creativity that was spun into this show?
I guess hard isn't the word I would use, and even not disappointing. I mean, I love acting, and try and make every experience that moment. And optimistic. I'm an optimist, so optimistic that there will be more work like this. Mm-hmm. That this will inspire other works, and yeah, I guess that's it. So I was always someone, this may sound awful, but I was always someone in the theater when everyone was crying and hugging because it's over. I never think of things as over. Mm-hmm. I just don't, it's just not a concept. It's like, oh, I'm moving on to something else.
Yeah.
Where's my next play? So I don't go through, and I wasn't like Michael. I was listening to his interview, and he was so involved, and if I had been more in every episode and traveled with everyone, that's a whole different experience.
Right.
I really was in and out and got all the frosting and loveliness and didn't have to. Sure, I would love it to go on, but as we know, everything's temporary.
Right.
So I was listening to an interview with you, and you said that I believe one of your earlier roles, I think as a prisoner, influenced your work with in the prisons. Mm-hmm. So moving into Sense8, you're saying you were already pretty much living the life that Sense8 represents. Do you think Sense8 shifted your activism in any way, or influenced you, or inspired you to do anything different?
I think one of the things it did, which I'd been aware of transgenders and the difficulty of that, but that it brought it. It made it. It felt more it became more personal for me. Uh-huh. And in some of my work in San Quentin, one of the groups we have a transgender woman, and so I do. That is a very strong point, because it is very strong, and it really did help me. Even though I always, you think I'm fine with everybody, or whatever. Right. I deeply felt it after Sense8. It became part of who I am, and so when I met Kim, I felt very connected with her and understood more, and that's excellent too. Yeah,
that's great.
That I do feel like things I work on, even the most shallow of things, I hope to bring something back to my life from it, because it is an art. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So should we talk about death?
Love that. I've been dying to talk about that.
All right, I wanna start this with a quote that I took from someone named Sandra Fish. The moment we die is the most important moment.
Oh,
so explain that further. That's an incredible line that you said.
And it's something that has come to me over a lot of, I guess I've always been interested, but when one of my best friends died at age 42 in 1997, and she was a costumer in films, by the way, Thelma and Louise, Shawshank Redemption, and she was amazing the way she died, and I got to hold her hand when she took her last breath, and so many profound things happened during that time that I carry with me now. I mean, I could weep. I'm just so moved by the human experience, and that we share this, and that you feel something happening at that moment. It's undeniable. And so I got further and further into it. And as I've volunteer hospice and holding dying babies, and really passionate about helping prisoners in our prisons to die with dignity and some form of peace, because I do think it affects all of us, that moment. It's an expansive, inclusive moment that will affect all of us. And if we have, here San Quentin is just a few miles away from where I live, people dying badly in there, it's a horrible thing for all of us, and affects all our neighborhoods. I just think it's so much, there's so much we don't know, but it is a profound moment. And it doesn't mean it has to be done a certain way. I'm very much about the individual. They say you die how you live, and also you can change at your last breath. I believe that too. I think the opportunity to live until your last breath is key. Yes, we're all dying, but yes, we're all living until that last breath. And it is a very, to be around it is life-changing. Then I have to say, one of my favorite quotes from the Zen monk who was teaching Jack Cornfield when he was a young, learning to be a monk, and he was worrying about this and worrying about that. And the monk just looked at him and said, "Don't worry, soon dead." And I take great comfort in that. Some people don't, but I take great comfort in that, because it gives you such a freedom to live, and when you get worried, we all do, about petty things or even maybe big things, and go, well, on your bad days, you can say, well, I'm going to be dead anyway. let it go. Or on your good days, you go, wow, enjoy this. And I do make my decisions based on my deathbed. That moment, I do not want to regret anything. I don't want to die and think I didn't live. And that's a horror to me. And so that is where I make my decisions when I'm confused. And it's more peaceful than birth, I must say. Watching my daughter give birth was a nightmare. All the blood and pain and all the agony, and then with death, it tends to be very peaceful most of the time. Not always, but most of the time.
I think, our society has a very convoluted relationship with death that is sad. I think that bringing our remembrance back to that as a continuation of life is really important. And I've had the opportunity since the first time I was with someone at death. I was a young, maybe late teen, early adult. But I've had that experience, some very beautiful experiences with people that I was very close to. And my nephew died at 18 months, and we brought him home on hospice thinking he was going to have 24 hours. And it was about 4 or 5 days of just holding this baby in our arms. And it changes you, and not in the way that people might think, as far as the pain of that. There's a lot of beauty in that. Yes. And I had, I've been at the deathbed with many clients and people because of my work, but just even, and that's beautiful too. The presence also. I had a really beautiful experience with one of my closest friends who was in England. We were Sense8s, I would say. We were of the same cluster. And we were young. I met her at a high school exchange, and then she was in her early 30s when she died of cancer. And I went to her It turned out the week before she died. She died almost right after I left. And they were warning me that she was pretty much on her deathbed. But we had the most miraculous week. She rallied in the energy. We went for a walk. She drove me in her sports car. And when I said goodbye to her parents, her dad hugged me and said, "Thank you for bringing us our Daz back," which was her nickname. And then she crossed gently like 2 days later. There's so much beauty at the end of life when we can show up.
Yeah, I was euphoric when my friend took her last breath. I was just high for like 24 hours, and then I crashed a couple days later just to let the grief part out. But yeah, I was just felt very, very euphoric, and it's, you want to live in that moment, those kinds of moments all the time with that kind of presence, because when you're with, as you know, people who are dying and going on and passing on and transitioning on. I am a believer in reincarnation, but there is no place to go but be very, very present and open. And it's such and timeless. It's a wonderful, wonderful, free place to be. And it's a constant practice out in the hubbub of the world.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast quite a bit. I've contemplated death for a very long time for many philosophies and things like that. But something you said earlier about the monk talking to the young man is that, if we don't truly understand death and what that means, we really can't live. Because we're so tied up in belief systems and restrictions, and we're truly not in the flow of life when we're afraid to die. But when we're in the presence, the transcendent energy of death that you mentioned, that was so expansive, that's when we can live. That's when we really come to life, because all the inhibitions kind of melt away, because we know we only have just moments left. So just the contemplation and reality of death and how intrinsic it is to living life, I think it's I don't know, for me it's been a very important thing to mill over. Like you just said, it was a practice, and it's something that I've tangoed with for quite some time to make me to live the best life I possibly can. We talked about this in the last podcast quite a bit, actually. I had a little, I'll get you caught up here. I talked about, I have this little practice that I do for people I appreciate, and Sheila in particular in the podcast, but I think about her eulogy all the time, right? And so the other day she was interested and she wanted to know what I was talking about. And the reason I do that is because of appreciation, and because when somebody passes on, those of us who are still here, we want to remember them for the greatest attributes. So I do that as often as possible, because then I'm in constant gratitude for the life that I have and the people that are around me. So I'm very conscious of death and think that it's a very important subject to meditate upon and think upon as you go throughout life.
Absolutely. And I think that since it is a reality, it's in all of us as a reality. And if you're not, and if you're ignoring it or afraid of it, that feeds everything in your life, then it's a fear. It stops you. But if you're embracing it, you're right. It's expansive and freeing, and you get to live, and not that we don't get afraid of things but we go on and do them anyway.
Right. It's been said, a lot of people who come back or are on their deathbeds, they're upset about the things they didn't do. They don't have a lot of regrets. It's just like, I should have done so much more with my life. And we're too busy wrapped up in not dying, trying to survive instead of living life. And that's why we don't do those things.
Right. Right. I'm always walking around thinking, what, do they think they're going to live forever? Do it now. Well, there's a Buddhist thing, I think it says, welcome everything, push nothing away.
Right.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the death talk.
Yeah, no problem.
What about life after death? Do you feel like you can do you feel the presence? We have to go through grief. So you talked about with your friend that euphoric feeling, and feeling probably connected to her even after that last breath.
Oh, much, all the time, yeah. And I do, and I don't care how crazy it sounds, because I finally have accepted. I mean, after a few things, she communicates with me, and communicated with me even right after she died, and continues to. So that's a comfort. And I remember there was a counselor I had who was a brilliant metaphysical thinker and ex-priest, and he died at 80, and I was upset because I and told my daughter, gosh, I miss talking to Father Tolliver. She said, well, you can still talk to him.
Right.
And it's true. And I went, oh yeah, I guess I can. So there is this endless feeling, it's eternity is a big word.
Right.
But
you said I'm going to say it now. I don't care about being perceived as crazy. I would say it's crazy that the world thinks we don't communicate after death. To me, that's insanity. Yeah, that's a very narrow mind and life. Because there's so many outstanding miracles happening all the time, and we would call them miracles. And there's also a Rilke quote that is, what is it? Love and death are the great gifts given to us. Seldom are they opened. And I just want to open all of them. Right. I think it's awesome, and to live that way and to make your decisions based on that, and come to peace with it. I do think in many religions and at the core of maybe psychosis even. I was a therapist before I was the spiritual teacher, but, we have this core conflict, and it's innate in our being. I think that we're programmed with an instinct. I call the ego our primitive instinct to survive. And we're programmed to survive. And at the same time, there's this knowing of something really beautiful that happens after life. And so you see it in almost every religion, this, it's going to be wonderful when you die, but don't die, And it's in the very core of our being, which is our psychosis in humanity, I think.
Yeah. And that's why to me, it's all about evolving. And so we're here to learn and grow. And so that conflict is, I think, eggs us on to learn and grow. So we have that peace. And I'm a big fan of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. I've been reading them for almost 30 years, I guess. Every day I read one. And it does. The main focus is taming the ego and the reality of unity. And there's also the timelessness that is focused on, and eternity and spaciousness and all of that. But I think there is that conflict, and the conflict is there for growth. And so as we meditate and grow and learn and be open to that conflict starts to dissolve, really. The conflict becomes softer. That dividing line is softened.
Yeah, that's really the difference. Like you mentioned, you really believe in the unity of humanity, and not just that. We're in union with our environment too, our natural environment and everything. And I think for me, one of the so we teach ourselves right now, our current construct for humanity is separation theology in many ways. Not just religion, right? And so unity consciousness is where we're all headed, and that's what Sense8's about. But another beautiful thing about life and death, they're not separate. they're connected.
Yeah.
And they are part of our contextual reality for experience, right? And so that's why what you said here is death is the most important moment, because at the precipice between life and death is when we really get to slip into this transcended state, and that's a gift from the Creator, and we all get to have that experience where we get to be in that timelessness, be in a different, it's so peaceful. Anyway, it's a beautiful thing. So but that's also part of what Sheila was saying, like our society doesn't have a very good understanding, or we argue over these things because it's so subjective. But it's really, life and death should be considered in the unity consciousness and not the separation theology that we teach.
Yes.
We really do like death here, the three of us.
Yeah.
I mean, the beauty of it.
Right. This really smart, well-read Buddhist guy on the bus once, he goes, I just want to walk around with a sign that says, isn't it wonderful? We're all going to die.
And again, we do have to it doesn't take away the grief. You mentioned how you felt that joy of your friends crossing, but then you still have to go through the grief. So I just want to say to all our listeners, even though we're having this conversation, it doesn't mean that we don't experience the grief or go through that pain and all of that too.
Which is what I want. I talk with, there's this one amazing palliative care doctor, B.J. Miller. He did one of the top-rated TED Talks a couple years ago, and he lives here, and he's on our board actually, and he's an amazing person. But we talk about always, and maybe this is about the no morphine thing, because we're kind of on board with, as we live, we want to feel everything: the grief, the pain, the awkwardness, the uncomfortableness of being human, the suffering. And of course, then you get the joy and the beauty and beauty and joy even in that awkward pain.
Right.
And it's I don't really know where I was headed, but we want to feel it all. Well, the grief, I guess that's what I was thinking. And I can be very present with people and laughing and being around them as they're suffering and they want to laugh and we're talking. And then 9 times out of 10, I walk out that door and I sob. It just comes out of my body.
Right.
It's something that's there and it comes out and then it's gone. But I do have to release that very human emotion, and you don't want to keep it in your body for sure.
No, you don't.
Right, and that's the whole, in some ways, aside from helping people transition, the whole point of embracing death is so we can live more fully. And that means all the emotions, That means we're not trying to avoid any emotion. We're diving right in to them.
It is exciting. I'm like, whenever someone says they're bored or something, I'm like, how can you be bored? There's so much going on. I have to contain myself more than anything. Yeah.
You should just ask them, are you ready to die? What? What are you talking about? Are you ready to die? Well, no, I got all this shit to do. Well, then go do it. You're not bored.
Yeah. Keep living. Yeah. My mother, who's 90, is not good at talking about death. And we try and talk to her about it and, to get her wishes and things. And she's like, oh, you girls go. I'm not going. Well, Mom, I got some news for you. And I took care of a 103-year-old who is quite feisty, and she only started really getting weak when she was dying the last couple weeks, and she was in bed and talking to me, and she got very frightened and said, am I dying? And I said, well, I don't know. I can't tell if you're dying or not, but you are 103. It could be likely that you are. And then she stared into space for a minute, and then she just said, well, everybody dies. And I said, yeah. She goes, so I will die too. And then she said, but I've got so much left to do. It was so poignant. Yeah. Life is poignant.
That's beautiful.
And this is we're just talking about the big death, right? There's so many little deaths that we experience and change and go through on this journey of being a human being as well. And understanding the big death can help us understand the little deaths a little more, and vice versa.
Vice versa. My daughter said out loud the other day, she just said, well, it's I've discovered that it's all about letting go so that we will be able to let go at the end. And so it's a constant letting go of things. And I appreciate that. And I do that myself. It's a really wise, even when I held her and looked at her, I thought, she's not mine. She's not mine. You got to start letting go now, because it's such, as you know, as a mother, such a tightly woven texture, and there's a lot of pain, emotional pain of letting go. But it's when you let go, you're closer.
Exactly.
Somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I same thing. Right from when my children were born, I knew my job was to let them go progressively until it actually. Like you said, it makes you closer. We had no struggles during their teenage years because we were always letting them go, letting them grow and letting them go. And at one point, my daughter was near the end of her teenage years, and I kept saying, well, we might not get along at some point during your teenage years. And she's like, Mom, if that was going to happen, I think it would have happened by now,
Especially with mother and daughter, that's awesome.
But it's all because of that little, because it's, like you have to grieve. If it's the grieving the 2-year-old, grieving the infant, grieving the 5-year-old, as a mother and as ourselves. Like I look back at my life sometimes and I grieve my teenager, like they're all still, they're like different human beings, even myself as a child, as a teen. And if you constantly let go, then that big let go is easier.
Yeah.
I'm not a planner. I mean, I suppose I plan some things, and my morning is important, but I always find, the more I let go and just follow my nose, profound things happen. It's like, wow, if I hadn't done that, that wouldn't happen,
Right.
It's like, and I wasn't even thinking about it. And I ran into so-and-so and, my life has changed. And it just, being open, you get more, I think I get more helpful experience than being closed, where I would close myself off from really my destiny, I think, in a way. You can take either path. There's an easier path and a less painful path, and then there's the painful path. Right.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I like to stay open too, and it's led me to a great many experiences.
Yeah.
So you have some interesting things coming up with the prison. Can you talk a little bit more about the prison
hospice project that I've been passionate about for over a decade, and it's been a long road and winding road, and now I have these amazing people involved that have lifted it to another place, and we're going into San Quentin finally a little over a year ago. We started going in once a week and training stealth. The prison is not on board at San Quentin, and we work with this group of prisoners called Brothers Keepers. It was formed in 2005 to help train them to be crisis counselors to help with suicide in prisons. But they help with many, many things, and they've been interested in end-of-life issues for a long time, and I've been going in and visiting and talking about it. But now we finally did this 8-month training with them, a small group of Brother Keepers graduates, and they graduated last week, which was huge. And so now we're sort of open to talking about it, because we were afraid the prison would close us down and not let us come in anymore. But now that they've been trained, they can't take away their training, because people are dying badly in prisons and isolated, and sometimes without any help in cells. And when they die in a cell, their cellmate, who has now become, it's like family members, and they've even cared for them and quite deeply. But when a cellmate dies, they take the living cellmate and put him in the hole, which is isolation in a very dark, damp, black hole. And because they sometimes for months while they investigate and make sure, no foul play.
Oh my gosh.
So imagine grieving in isolation, darkness, and no human contact.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's inhumane. And so we are working very hard at this. And there's an artist who has been coming in and drawing the men, and because there's only men in the group, no transgender in that particular group, and she's doing a one-page piece in California Magazine. It's on the last page, and it'll be in the LA Times, and it'll be in San Francisco Chronicle, and there's a lot of people that want to start doing podcasts with us, and there's an international person on our board who wants us to go to the UN, and it is important. I always get quite upset. It's very important that we take care of these people in our prisons who shouldn't be in that space anyway. And they are treated very badly. And the people we work with are some of the most emotionally intelligent people I have ever met. They have grown so much from horrible childhoods. And because of the programs at San Quentin that they've taken advantage of, these are, and even the people who don't take programs, we must be humane enough to care for them, at least at that last moment. If we haven't their whole lives and not as children, never supported them, at that last moment, we, as a society, we need to do that. So, yes, that's the passion. And humaneprisonhospiceproject.org is our website, which inmates created, last mile program. So that is a passion. And we're talking about getting it on the ballot in California as well. So
that's really powerful.
It is, and
I'm so grateful for you for doing this, for bringing the attention to people, and
thank you,
and for seeing them as human. I did kind of, going back to talking about Janet and me growing up in a middle class suburb, and the belief system that bad people went to jail. And then I moved beyond that and realized, poor people go to jail, or minorities go to jail.
Yeah.
It doesn't have...
It makes for us to say good and bad people. Oh, well, the bad people are in there, so it's okay,
Right.
And it couldn't be more wrong. And of course, and when I taught in Rikers, and they'd say, there's a lot of shame, and I'd say, look, I just didn't get caught, and I'm white, and our society needs to be ashamed, not you. It's so the opposite of how this should be handled. So it is good to educate people, because they don't know. I mean, I talk to people around here, and they're shocked there's not end of life care in the prisons.
Right. Yeah, and hearing what you said about them putting the cellmate in isolation just blew my mind. Like, I would not have, I could, the other things that you've said and stuff, it's like, I guess I hadn't put my attention on that, but I can see that. But that piece, like, wow.
That's very traumatic.
Breaking international laws, too, I just found out, of cruel and unusual punishment.
Right.
There's an international law that phrases it differently, but it is breaking the law. And our prisons in California, I'm not sure about the country, but they're their own fiefdom, and so they get to make their own laws. And they can also make good laws, depending on the warden. Uh-huh. So I'm optimistic. It'll happen.
That's awesome.
So
you need to be.
Well, you're making it happen. It's been a long journey for this, and you're making a lot of headway there.
Yes, a lot of headway this year, and a lot now. And thanks to, Lady Bird Morgan and a slew of people who are just exceptional talents in this work. And, good combination of people.
That's wonderful.
Talk about living the Sense8 way and paying it forward. Definitely.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yep, for sure.
I hope so.
In my book, anyway.
It does. Yeah, and in fact, Lady Bird, who's the facilitator, and she's worked with Doctors Without Borders and done a lot of hospice. She's a hospice nurse, and she works in psych wards to make some money, and then does this enormous work at San Quentin. She loves Sense8, and she often says, she'll mention someone and goes, "He's my Sense8." He's one of my Sense8s,
Right
so
on.
it's very cool. Very cool.
That's awesome.
Sandra Fish, thank you so much for coming to the show and talking with us today.
It's been amazing. You are such a beautiful person and such an amazing Janet.
You Janet, so awesome.
So can you give the listeners the website again for the project so they can learn more about what you're doing, and maybe there's a donation that we can make?
Cool. There's a little button for that if they want.
Awesome.
Just put your hearts there. That's good. Thank you. It's humaneprisonhospiceproject.org.
Perfect.
humaneprisonhospiceproject.org. Yes.
All right,
Thank
everybody, check it out. Thank you, Sandra.
God, thank you so much. So fun.
What a beautiful show we had today with Sandra Fish. That brings us to the end, folks. If you enjoyed this show, head over to patreon.com/livesense8. Get some exclusive perks over there and support us so we can grow even more. We can be reached on Twitter at live_sense8. You can send us an email at team@livesense8.com. Please review us on whatever platform you are. iTunes is the best. So if you can give us a 5-star rating and review on our episodes, that would be amazing to help us reach more Sense8 people and bring more awareness to all the concepts of the show as we continue the dialogue. And thank you very much for all your social love out there on social media and supporting us that way. It really does mean a lot. And until next time, continue living the Sense8 way.